Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today. Let's do it. Morticians. What's the strangest, creepiest, or most odd experience you've ever had working with the dead? Please remember to like, share, hype, listen, and ask for shoutouts. And subscribe. A writing professor of mine used to work in small-town journalism and decided to interview some folks from the local retirement home to get a close-up view of his town's history. One of his interviews was an ancient retired mortician who told him a rather interesting story. Shortly before 1920, two teens were going to a school dance in a blizzard. The carriage they had taken got stranded, and the boy went for help. The girl unfortunately froze to death in the carriage in an upright seated position. Apparently, the mortician had to sit her in a rocking chair in front of the fire to thaw her out before he could go about his usual business. I was a student at the time, but my first ever bloater was brought in, and once we popped him, insides were outside and everywhere. Would not recommend. On my first night shift, I thought staff were with me because I kept hearing what sounded like breathing. Fresh body brought in and was releasing gas. I'd never dealt with anyone dying in the hour being brought in, so it was scary hearing this body breathing. I've been there when family members have passed and witnessed breathing and limbs moving, so I know it's normal, but as a student, the staff like to work with you. Bizarre one was piecing a guy back together after he committed suicide by gunshot to the face. Family wanted an open casket. Had to try our best, then ask one family member in to see if they still wanted an open casket, because we just didn't feel like it was right. Dad comes in, sees that no matter how we tried, we couldn't make him look like the same as before, and agrees the family shouldn't see him this way. The day we delivered him to the funeral parlor, family changes their mind and has open casket anyway. Found out rest of the family didn't know he shot himself in the face. We ended up getting a letter of complaint from other members of the family for the open casket. Headed to a student in a few days, but after would still love to be in that career though. Uncomfortable? Being trapped in the morgue alone during a hurricane. Our morgue was basically in a basement type situation, and the hospital was near a main waterway that flooded. I had to move all the bodies to the highest cabinets, pray the generators would keep everyone cold, and was standing on my desk for about 2 hours when someone finally came for me. Bizarre would be drowned guy who was DOA, and once looked up in the cabinet, a tapping noise started coming from him. It was a crab that had made itself at home inside him, and when it got cold he wanted out. Creepy was when we got some people who were doing bath salts and had eaten other people. They looked crazy even in death. Heard on the news a friend from my youth had been killed. I was terribly sad for him. He never could escape his demons, and it led him down some terrible paths. Came into work a few nights later, and there he was, face completely bashed in by a rock. This wasn't the first time someone I knew ended up in our morgue, but certainly the saddest. Dad was a coroner, if I recall correctly, before switching to doctor. I can never remember the details correctly for the medical stuff, but pretty much the body getting examined was a former birthday clown. There weren't any external wounds, so he figured the cause of death was internal. The guy had gastroparesis, which to my dad meant cool stomach contents should be in good shape. His team opens the dude up and sees this flurry of... There's a partially digested birthday cake, that edible confetti stuff, and streamers, and about a dozen pills of Xanax next to all of it. Dad sifts through the stomach some more and sees what looks like a sponge of some kind. He pulls one out, and it's a sponge dino that comes in those capsules you drop in the water. He finds more, about a small biome's worth. He thought he was getting pranked. The story pieces together as the clown decided to end it with Xanax and booze. He got a store-bought cake and eats it with everything on it, then chases down some dino sponges just for the hell of it. Doesn't exactly fit the criteria, but I'm going to tell the story anyway. I come from a smallish town. We have one mortician and everyone knows him. His daughter dated my cousin during that period of time. One year, a different cousin got into a bad car accident right outside of the county and died on impact. Of course, they called it in, and he was asked to come down to the scene and retrieve the body. He was told the estimated age of the girl, the make of her vehicle, and which direction she was driving on the highway. The age and vehicle make matched that of his daughter, who was visiting her boyfriend at the time. He couldn't get a hold of his daughter, so he showed up at the scene, fully prepared to be picking up his own child. Sadly enough, this scared him so badly that this was the last funeral he ever performed. 8 years later, and he still visits my deceased cousin's parents regularly just to check in. It's clearly stuck with him. Not a mortician. This comes from my mother back when she was a teenager. Guy she knows takes a job with the local funeral home. He works the graveyard shift. All was well for the first few months. Dude is often weirded out at work. Claims that the building is haunted. Earlier in the evening, they get a call from the hospital saying that they have a body there ready for pickup. They pick her up. Guy's freaking out. Says he has a bad feeling. Later in the evening, mortician has to step out for a bit, leaving Guy there alone with the dead body. He goes about his work, still a little freaked out. Suddenly, he hears this low, soft moan. He swears it is just his mind playing tricks on him. Goes about his business. He hears it again, little louder than last time. It is late. He's alone. He's just hearing things, probably just the pipes settling. The plumbing is old after all. Short time passes, and it's louder. At this point, he sure isn't just imagining things. He knows he heard the dead lady moan. His first thought was the mortician was fucking with him. He's been shaken all evening, and this asshole is pranking him. He marches over, very funny you dick, yanks back the sheet covering the dead lady, expecting to find the mortician somewhere around her. Dead lady grabs the guy's wrist. He lets out this scream and bolts for the door. Forgets his car, runs all the way home. Turns out old lady wasn't dead. Hospital got it wrong. Hooray 1950s medicine. She had been in a coma or something, and they had been sure she had passed on earlier that morning. She woke up at the funeral home and scared the ever-loving hell out of the assistant. He quit the next day, said he would never set foot there ever again. Whenever I hear about morticians, I'm always reminded of one story. Years ago, I was at my friend's wedding. I went solo, and they kind of sat me at a table with my friends from baseball, but then also the single girl. We hit it off, and we're dancing, and, we were making small talk, and I'm like, so what do you do? And she told me she was a mortician, and I don't know why, but I had this reaction like, I don't want to go out with you. I know that's probably wrong with me. Maybe she was lovely, but so I assume it's like a family business. So I'm like, oh, like your family's in it? She's like, no, I just wanted to do it. So I don't know. I never saw her again after that, but I don't think that was a long time ago. I don't think I did. But yeah, she went to St. John's here in Queens for mortuary science. So, but hey, the world needs it. So I hope she's doing well. My ex-in-laws were in the death business. They told me a story once about the county attorney whose wife passed away. The family was very wealthy, and she had a mouthful of gold fillings. The attorney demanded that my in-laws retrieve the gold from her mouth. This required using a dental drill to drill down her teeth and dig out the gold. My ex-father-in-law complied with the attorney's wishes, but was physically ill about having to do such a needless step to this lady. My dad is a mortician. We had actually lived above the funeral, and my life had been just like my girl. He's been a mortician for over 40 years and has tons of stories. The worst, by far, is the human soup guy. Apparently, this elderly gentleman passed away while having a bath, with the water still running. He was living alone in the house with very little family. I don't remember how long he was in the bath before someone found him. My dad goes to pick up the body, and it's human soup. The hot water constantly running, and the amount of time caused the body to turn to mush. He said the smell was the worst he'd ever smelled. He got back to the office later that day, and his boss told him to throw away his suit and he'd buy him another. I work with the dead, procure eyes and corneas for transplant. While I was working on one guy at the medical examiner's office, they brought in another guy whose cats had eaten his face clean. Just his face, nothing else. It was a sort of decaying, but still somewhat normal-looking dude with a bright Halloween-looking skull, picked clean. Lots of murder victims, gunshots, car accidents, even one train accident. A guy who hanged himself in front of his kids with a dog leash, which was still in the bag with the body. High-caliber self-inflicted gunshot wound to the face, with teeth and jaw and bits everywhere, and a bunch of gauze stuffed into the remaining hole. Let's not forget the guy in the decomp room, who was just a pile of bones, hair, and leathery tissue, paired with a bucket of goo. Not me, but my best friend works in the death business, so since she doesn't have a Reddit account, I'm going to steal her karma because this is my favorite story. She tells me all sorts of lovely things about her job and the recoveries she has done, but my favorite involves a gurney and some stairs. To set the scene, a family called in that their mother had passed in her apartment. 3rd story, narrow halls, and no elevators. Anyway, she goes to pick up the body to take back to the funeral home with an assistant. So they get up there and lift this woman who's close to 300 pounds on the gurney and begin their journey down to the van. Mind you, the whole family was there and pretty much in hysterics and crowd around as they make their way to the stairs. With family watching, they make it about halfway down the first flight of stairs when the body starts to slide. There's no way to reposition, so my friend, who is at the foot of the gurney, is now about ass level to the freshly deceased. So trying to make the best of the situation, they continue their way down and try not to shift their body anymore. The thing about dead bodies is that gas starts to exit pretty quickly, and I'm sure you know where this story is going. The body started letting out farts straight into my friend's face, with every step down they take, and this poor girl has to keep a straight face while getting crop dusted by a dead lady with her whole family watching. Well, this was not really a mortuary, but I was a student many years ago in the entomology department at the University of Tennessee. Dr. Bill Bass, a sort of P.T. Barnum of forensic anthropology, not a faker but a hell of a promoter, was the department head, and a major focus of the department was forensic anthropology. This was also before DNA testing, so skeletal forensics was essential in identifying bodies that were partially decayed. Dr. Bass would get about 15 to 20 cases every year, decayed or skeletal remains, to hopefully identify or at least profile race, sex, appropriate age, approximate age, and any distinguishing characteristics, and sometimes cause of death. Usually, these were vagrants, crime victims, or just historic or prehistoric Native American remains. One time in West Tennessee, they found a clothed but fully skeletonized body in a patch of dense vegetation in a little town in West Tennessee. The local sheriff and coroner loaded the body in the back of a pickup truck and drove the corpse all the way across the state, 400 miles, to Knoxville so Dr. Bass could do an ID. When the truck arrived, Dr. Bass went out and opened the body bag to find a complete skeleton that remained fully dressed. He looked the body up and down and then reached into the front pocket of the corpse's jeans and pulled out a wallet, which he opened to read off the name, address, race, height, and hair and eye color of the deceased. The sheriff and the coroner were a bit embarrassed. It turned out the dead guy had only been missing for about a week, but in the dense foliage of a West Tennessee thicket in midsummer, the bugs and beetles had completely stripped the bones of flesh. Bass did do a follow-up to make sure the driver's license and the corpse were a match. Dr. Bass had many interesting cases. He founded the infamous Body Farm, has written several books, fiction and nonfiction, and has featured in fictional form in many of Patricia Cornwall's crime novels. Not me, but my dad and his friend, the Mortician, Mr. Mort. My dad was doing some business on the other side of the state, pretty close to where his friend Mr. Mort lived. Mr. Mort invited him for a coffee, but said, "Hey, while you're here, can you help me with a particularly heavy one?" Meaning a large body needed to be cremated. My dad was in prime shape, and said sure. There was a 350 to 400 pound, 25 to 28 stone lady that needed to be moved from a gurney to the conveyor belt contraption to be rolled into the crematorium furnace. Normally, she'd be placed into some kind of cardboard coffin, but she was simply too large, so had to go in wearing a hospital gown. After some planning and effort, they successfully moved her over to the belt without dropping her, pushed her into the furnace, and turned it on. The crematorium was nearly automated. Basically, push a button and it went through everything it needed to do to properly turn whatever was inside to ash. So my dad and Mr. Mort said it and walked down the street for a coffee. About 20 minutes later, they see a fire truck go by and think nothing of it. Then another one goes by. This was a small town in western South Dakota, so there weren't many fire trucks. They walked outside and there were flames coming from the crematorium, and some oil was coming from the building, and the smell of burnt ham. What happened? The lady was so large that there wasn't enough space around her body in the furnace to generate the heat necessary to properly turn her to ash, but there was enough heat to melt her skin and turn her fat reserves into hot oil and leak out of the crematorium. The oil set the building on fire. Thankfully, it was in a separate garage, so the entire mortuary didn't go up in flames, and flaming oil started to flow down the driveway and down the street. The first fire engine was parked too close to the fire, and the hot oil flowed past the tires on one corner, then melted and popped them. So you had a bit of pandemonium of firefighters spraying the flames and others jumping into two fire trucks to move them away ASAP. Sorry for the abrupt ending, but I don't remember anything about the aftermath. I'll have to ask my dad when I see him, since this question was posted 18 hours ago. I'm guessing only a few people will see my post, but you're welcome. Worked in a mortuary for a few months because I needed a job, and it was at night. My job pretty much was checking the bodies as they were brought in and put them in cold storage. One night, they brought in 2 bodies back to back from a convalescent home. I didn't have time to put the first away yet, so I put it off to the side while I signed in the new delivery. The people leave and I go back to the first body and notice that it wasn't exactly as I left it. When I left, the body was flat on its back, and when I got back, it was sort of scrunched up. I backed out of the room and just sat down. The mortician came out and saw me pale as a ghost. I told him what happened and he laughed. He then proceeded to explain to me that sometimes the body will curl up after death because of rigor mortis, and after that's done, it'll go back to being limp. He proceeded to tell me that some cases are so bad that the bodies sit straight up. That he ended up putting the bodies away, and I spent the rest of the night freaked out. Not a mortician, but a gravedigger. I was 18 and it was my first full-time job. I was learning the ropes and the boss man told me to mark out a grave. A wife was joining her husband many decades after his internment. My coworker taught me how to spec out an adjoining grave site. Split the tombstone in half, move over 6 inches, then plot the new grave with string in the prescribed dimensions. I did that. Then the backhoe arrived. As the backhoe guy dug the grave, a problem emerged. We could see bones in the dirt. My coworker stopped the backhoe guy and started yelling at me. I told him I marked the site exactly as he said. 6 inches to the left to center the marker, then 3 feet wide, but it appears, 8 feet long, etc. I did as I was told, but it appeared the husband wasn't sighted correctly and was not buried in a vault. His cheap pine coffin had rotted and he was everywhere. But it was still all my fault, apparently. The backhoe dug down an extra foot into the husband's side of the site, I was tasked to jump in and reinter all the bones on his side of the site. So I jumped in, packed all them bones and dirt into his side. My coworker and the backhoe guy had a laugh while yelling at me about the bones I had missed and making me pack them in. We walked up with his side of the grave nice and even, then overpacked it a bit and finished up with the wife's grave. It was some grisly shit, man. But hey, it was 1982 and I was making $10 an hour, which was big money. With great wealth comes great responsibilities. I work in forensics, specifically as an entomologist. I extract insects from decomposing bodies to estimate the time of death or supplement existing evidence. It's as a grotesque an occupation as you can imagine. The most odious cadaver was the partial skeletal remains of an 8-month pregnant mother who gave life to a plethora of maggots, botflies, and moth larvae were consuming her hair like some monstrous funeral shroud. The tiny bones of the baby were disintegrating under the unrelenting feasting of ham beetles as its flesh was too dry for maggots to find purchase. They preferred the malleable flesh of the mother's face and breast. Observing the corpse, her exposed womb appeared to be giving birth. Many adult beetles were scuttling over her pubic bone and into the cradle of her pelvis. She was supine. Her limbs were not splayed in distress, but unfortunately her expression was indiscernible due to the divots of botflies imbued in her flesh on her cheeks. Then I began my extraction. It was a drug-induced suicide which encapsulated the tranquility of her and her child's death. Wow. I'm still working on my licenses, so I'm not officially a funeral director and embalmer yet, but I've been going to the medical examiner's office to practice embalming with my school for several months now. The people we work on down there are not in very good shape, usually dead at least a month before we get to see them. Needless to say, it's not a one-artery, low-formaldehyde job. Each week we raise a minimum of 6 arteries, both carotids, both femorals, and both axillaries. Plus, the 2 radials, if there's some trouble getting fluid distribution to the hands and forearms. To put into perspective, a typical funeral home case would only need 1, maybe 2 arteries, depending on the embalmer's preference. There aren't a lot of creepy or bizarre cases that stick out in my mind, but uncomfortable things definitely come up. Whenever there's a young person on the table, it's sad. The degree of decomp can lead to a lot of difficult nights. The smell alone can really get to you. The thing that always spooks me, though, is when I'm raising an axillary artery. The site that we look for, it is the area directly distal toward fingers, away from body mass to the armpit. There are a lot of tendons and such in there as well. When you're holding the person's arm up, digging around near the tendons, sometimes their arm will move. It happens a lot, but I still get momentarily terrified when the person grabs me. Other than that, there's not much I can contribute to this question. I know some second-hand stories from other people, but anything directly from me isn't too exciting. I have lots of stories of conveniently gross things, but nothing really bizarre. It was my birthday last year and I was on call. I got a call at 3:30 a.m. that we had a residential death. Our medical examiner deputy called the funeral home and told us to bring us reinforcements. I meet up with a coworker and we get to the house about 30 minutes later. The ME pulls us aside and tells us the guy is in the basement. He's 6'8" and probably 300 pounds, so there's just 3 employees of the funeral home and our ME at the house. By the grace of God, we get this guy onto our cot, but then we have to get this guy up the flight of stairs. The 2 older guys go up front, and I take the back with my coworker. When you take a cot up a flight of stairs, you don't really know how hard it is to unroll. You get both sets of wheels on the stairs. The first 4 stairs go pretty well, but we know the back wheels are about to go up. I've dealt with large people and stairs before, but this was a different demon. There was really only enough room for one person on the stair, so I volunteered to try. We made it maybe 2 stairs before his body shifted on the cot and he started sliding back. We brought him back down and ended up calling the fire department. The fire department brought 10 guys. We tied off the cot and tried making it up the stairs again, but it just wasn't going to happen. The fire chief and my funeral home owner told us to wait and went to talk to the family upstairs. After a while, the chief came down with a sawzall and told us that we're making a door. We cut a hole in the side of the wall, wheeled him out, and put an end to the longest removal of my career. One of the firefighters was a woodworker, and he came back that day and fixed up the wall in the basement. I showed up to that fire station that day with 5 pizzas and a case of beer.